my name is Celia Bryce and I'm one of the judges who judged the stories in the Write Festival short story competition event of this year. The theme was fantastical stories, so we were looking at science fiction and fantasy. Along with me there was Adam Peacock, and we spent quite some time looking at all the stories, of which there were quite a few, and they were just really great just to sit and read these stories. And when it came to the sort of final few, getting to the top sort of 10 and then to the top 3, Adam and I, well, you know, we didn't always agree, which is fine, that's what judging's all about. But Adam and I decided that we couldn't decide what should be first and second. So we came to the conclusion that we'd have joint first prizes. And my job today is to read out those stories for you. Okay, so the stories I'm going to read today are Looking for Lucifer by Alex Minns and The Tourist by Gary Young. Joint first stories, so I'll start with this one. Looking for Lucifer by Alex Minns. I glared back at the man across the bar who wouldn't stop looking at me. To be fair, he might have been in a drunken stupor considering how wretched he looked. His brown hair needed a cut and fell limply, framing his eyes like some forgotten 90s pop star. His body swayed almost imperceptibly as he sat there watching me with his dull, sunken, lifeless eyes. Thankfully, Samuel wandered into my view, blocking the pathetic creature. He poured another measure in my glass, but was sighing in reproach as he did so. What's his problem? I nodded across the bar at my new nemesis. Azeroth, how many times have you sat at this bar? Why? It's a mirror, you idiot. I craned around the cranky barman to see the other man doing the same. Oh, I sneered at my reflection all the same. Handsome devil. Don't invoke that name in here, Samuel snapped. How many times do I have to tell you? What's the current count? The barman rolled his eyes and went to serve a couple of vampires down at the other end of the bar, leaving me with my reflection and yet another shot of whiskey. I held the amber liquid in my mouth to prolong the burning sensation before swallowing. A pleasant warmth spread through my throat and stomach. The vamps were fawning over each other, hands everywhere. The woman caught me looking and flashed her fangs at me. Vampires are such territorial creatures, always trying to look like the biggest bad in the room. I let my eyes deepen to their full natural colour, much like the amber liquid in the glass. My aura flowed towards her, and the arrogant sneer soon fell from her face. As the icy mist of my aura touched the vamps, the male stiffened and instinctively pulled her away. That got me another eye roll from Samuel. I shrugged, feigning complete innocence, and went back to giving my drink my full attention. I outranked nearly everyone in the poky little place. That's why I like it. Not because I have the most power, admittedly, not much, but because it's never full of powerful, posing demons. I could sit and have a relaxing drink without another demon lord flouncing about saying how wonderfully evil he had been. There were probably only 6 other people in the place. The light was so low that, unless they were within 5 feet of me, I couldn't see them. If I wanted to, I could read the room and tell you exactly what was in here, but I wasn't fussed. It did explain why I was so surprised when I felt him enter. My instinct was to run. I tried to stand, but my treacherous legs took too long to catch up, and they buckled beneath me, leaving me in a heap as Gadriel entered. Get up, Azeroth, there's no need to bow. The newcomer hadn't even tried to temper his aura. Everyone in the bar could feel the presence of a high demon lord. I heard chairs scraping across the floor as some patrons decided to take that as a cue to leave. Petulantly, I crossed my legs and arms and leaned back against the bar. I rather like it down here, thank you. Gadriel made a disgusted noise. Do not make me stay in this hellhole longer than necessary. Weird saying that, isn't it? I replied. Technically, you should like hellholes. Oh, this was a mistake. I waited for him to turn around and storm off, but he didn't. I sat up, intrigued. He must have been desperate. What's wrong? Wrong, Gadriel snarled. Wrong is that I'm here coming to a waste of brimstone for help when I should be out there doing my job. But I can't because... His eyes were blazing red, but he cut his words short, still unable to admit it to me. You don't know where he is, do you? Now, in the circles I run in, looks can kill, and I was fairly sure that it was taking every ounce of Gadriel's control to not burn me to a pile of ash. The familiar buzz of his power thrummed in the air, but it did little to intimidate me. Eventually, he gave up on the Mexican standoff and slid onto a stool. The position made me crane my neck to such a degree that I had to admit defeat and stand up. Well, claw my way up, using the bar as support. The other demons stared at the counter, and for a moment I felt almost sorry for him. Then I pulled myself together. The man was huge and spent his every day looking intimidating and hurting others, and for this to be notable for a demon should tell you everything you need to know about Gadriel. I'm not sure what he was before he transitioned into demonhood. From his looks, I'd have said a boxer. However, he was far too mean and devious for that. This is what made him the perfect choice for bodyguard to one of the princes, Lucifer, to be exact. What happened? I don't know. He sounded pathetic, like a small child who'd been told off. His shoulders were rounded, making his head disappear into them, like a turtle. I found myself staring, fascinated by the stubble across his scalp, his hair having been cut very closely. You must have to do that every day. I breathed, nonplussed. What? Your hair, why bother? I shook my head, but quickly felt the heat rise again as Gadriel started to anger. Never mind, not important. Tell me what you do know, up to the bit you don't. Gadriel sat back and turned his stool slightly so he was facing me. I'll show you. He reached out. My drink-addled brain didn't react quickly enough. I saw the hand, but my mind didn't connect the dots until it was too late. No, don't! The world disappeared from beneath me, rushing away in a wave of colours and images. I felt weightless. As we started to descend to our destination, my hair flapped around in the wind and my stomach began to lurch. The golden yellow walls finally took shape around us as we arrived in Lucifer's quarters. Thankfully, I'd been here before, so I was able to dart straight into his ensuite and plant my head in the toilet bowl before I threw up over a Prince of Hell's bedspread. Belatedly, I thrust my left leg backwards and kicked the door shut behind me to give myself a little peace and quiet. When I eventually came up for air, I felt much more sober. Damn, Gadriel, I had worked hard on that drunken stupor. Leaning against the sink, I stared at my reflection, this time being fully aware of who was staring back at me. I looked awful. Possibly the worst since I had died. I had been having a bad run and it was starting to take its toll. Everyone thinks being a demon is easy, but screw up a couple of crossroads deals and suddenly everyone's laughing and there's talk of going on refresher courses. I shuddered. Once through hell's training programme was enough for anyone. It wasn't my fault I wasn't good at the contractual work. I should never have been put on that duty. My gig was surveillance, checking up on potential new recruits before they left the mortal coil and getting evidence for the princes. It was ideal, really, having been a detective before I was unfairly finished by an angry spouse. I was still having a hard time understanding why I'd ended up down below. Okay, I had done some underhand things when alive, but all in the name of detective work. There was a complaints procedure I could go through, see if I could get moved upstairs, but the problem was, as soon as you submit the paperwork, the princes know you're trying to get out, and bang, refresher course it is. Surely the afterlife was supposed to be easier. The bang on the ensuite door seemed to give me my answer. I took a deep breath and splashed water on my face. A quick sweep of fingers through my hair and I was ready to face Gabriel again. I gave the toilet a flush, drew myself up and walked out into the decadent living area with as much poise as I could muster. Are you finished? You really shouldn't drag a man through a teleport with no warning, you know. I scowled at him for a second before taking a panoramic view of the space. I had been here before, but it had been a little tidier that time. The walls glowed yellow and were adorned with an array of golden fittings and curtains. I wouldn't like to say Lucifer's style was ostentatious, at least not to his face, but most would happily think it. We were in the top floor studio apartment, about 20 floors up. From here, the people on the streets below weren't even big enough to be called specks. Not that the princes thought themselves above everyone else or anything. Don't get me wrong, Lucifer isn't too bad, considering. But the princes, well, they are like mafia bosses with an uneasy truce between them all. And when things went south, it wasn't them who suffered. 2 large sofas sat in the middle of the space, one pointing towards a smashed cinema screen mounted to the wall, the other to the wall-length window that looked out onto the cityscape. The sofas were in place, but the backs had been slashed and ripped open. Every piece of electronics in the room had been gutted, and the contents spilled on the floor. Artwork had been taken off the walls, some had the backs torn open. A tall standing lamp had been knocked to the floor. I craned my neck around the corner to see the kitchen area and noted it was in the same level of disarray. Bedroom? The same. Gabriel nodded solemnly. There was a knock on the door and 2 demons entered the apartment. A sharp nod from Gabriel made them take up positions just inside the door. These 2 have been on duty for the last 24 hours. We heard smashing, but we couldn't get in the room, the one on the left with fluffy hair started saying. They were both wearing a black suit, black shirt and black tie, and looked like a pair of bookends. The second man took up the story. We called Gabriel straight away and he managed to get in, but this was what we found. No sign of anyone. How long between smashing and getting in? 5 minutes, Fluffy replied. Who had been in and out of here during your shift? Just the prince, Fluffy continued. He looked at his limp-haired companion for confirmation. So, I began, turning back to Gabriel. What do you want me to do? What do you think? He snapped. The temperature rose. Well, do you want me to find Lucifer or tell you why he destroyed his own apartment? Gabriel's wide mouth closed and then opened again before switching between the 2 states for a few moments. His large brow knitted in confusion before he looked back at the room. I sighed, remembering that just because a demon had a high position within the ranks of a prince didn't mean he was blessed with numerous brain cells. Blessed probably not being the right word. Walking over to the centre of the room, I ran my eyes over the destroyed objects, looking for any remnants that might have been left behind. Look, no one else got in, did they? or your magical alarm system would have registered, yes? Gadriel nodded. And although you heard smashing, did you hear any voices? Fluffy and Flat glanced at each other, small shakes of head going between them to check they were on the same page before they confirmed that there had been no voices. I'm pretty sure that if someone had come to attack Lucifer and had made this much mess, there would have been shouting. Put that with the places that have been wrecked. I was surprised by the lack of evidence. There would have been no reason for Lucifer to clean them all up. I dropped to the floor and glanced under the sofa. Everyone always forgets to check for bits kicked under there. Once I got over the complete lack of dirt and dust, my eyes landed on the prize. I grinned, getting my best smug smile ready as I reached under the furniture. I leapt back to my feet, waving the offending device at my audience. What's that? Gadriel came closer and stared at it. It was a small metallic disc, no bigger than a watch battery. A bug? My smile broadened. Someone has been listening to our prince, and he found out. What? Gadriel's face instantly became a deeper red. Impossible. We vet everyone who comes in these rooms. Yes. I tilted my head, thinking for a second. I'm guessing you came to get me straight away. Hopefully get this thing sorted without anyone else getting wind of it. Gadriel nodded. So no one else has been here, just you three. I saw the twitch then, barely noticeable, but his foot shifted just a fraction of an inch. Yes, just us. Get to the point, Azeroth. Gladly. If there were bugs in half the places Lucifer smashed, then that's a lot of bugs. An infestation, if you will. I started pacing the room, giving a theatrical flourish of my hand as I spoke, half to annoy Gadriel, half because I watched too many Agatha Christie adaptations. Now, there's a chance that they were all done at once, but I bet it was a long-term project. Get a few in every now and then when they had access and privacy. I paused as the foot twitched again. The curious part is the fact that they've all disappeared now, after Lucifer ripped them out of their hidey holes. Now, we can check the bin, but I'm thinking Lucifer was too annoyed to think about being tidy. Someone removed them after. Gadriel spoke slowly. Realization dawned on him, and he turned to the two guards. You two were the only two that had access when I went to fetch Azeroth. We didn't do anything, sir. We kept the scene secure. Flathead looked panicked. I went downstairs to check the building for you and check video feeds, and Quint stayed here guarding the door. Quint's head dropped, as did his fluffy hair, his previously twitching foot now remarkably still. I edged closer in case he made a dash for it, but he seemed to have realised he was done for. Idiot, he muttered to his partner. What did I do? Gad, can I suggest you look into recruiting some security with slightly higher IQ? Call me Gad again and you'll be on door duty. Noted, I nodded sagely. Well, I'm pretty sure a little refresher training will be enough to convince Quint to tell you who put him up to it. What? Quint's head snapped up and his eyes flashed in alarm. It was Prince Mammon. That was easy. I blinked. I'll be off then. I'll waive my usual fee as it's you. I flashed a disarming smile at Gadriel that had absolutely no effect. Wait, I need you to find Lucifer. Oh, I know where he is. I told you not to drag me out of that bar. I didn't wait to explain. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath before teleporting myself back to the dark haven I had been pulled from. I wobbled, but I'd been ready for the shift this time. though that didn't mean I enjoyed it. Normally, I only do it if absolutely necessary. But this time, I wanted a dramatic exit. I took a few steps to the bar and collapsed into my normal seat before flashing a smile at the vamps who were still cowering in the back. Samuel wandered over nonchalantly and placed a glass in front of me before promptly filling it. "You're back quick." Simple job, really. Well, for one of my extraordinary skill set anyway. I grinned and swiped my hand at the glass, lifting it and draining it in one go. Of course, you could have just asked me for my help earlier. You know, without tearing up your flat and having a mean demon abduct me. Samuel froze. I kept my eyes fixed into the bottom of my glass, so I didn't have to look at him. It was a matter of pride. How? He wasn't sure what question to ask. How long have I known you've been moonlighting as a barman? You've been doing it, 8 years? So about 7 years and 11 months. I put the glass down. You can take a new face, but you have certain habits that are hard to conceal, and you get sloppy when you think I'm too drunk. A few slips of the tongue. You told Gadriel? Hell no, pardon my language. You're my favourite barman. You'll go back when you want to, you always do. I finally dared to look up at his borrowed face. He was smiling. I wasn't sure if that was a good sign or not. It's not often I can find someone trustworthy and candid. He filled up my glass again. Now I was really worried. Who was it? Mammon. He nodded. Well, it seems that things are about to get interesting with my brothers. I think I may have use for a man with your extraordinary skill set. Are you offering me a job? How do you feel about being Lucifer's personal detective? I picked up the glass. Does it come with health insurance? The Tourist by Gary Young. She was perched on a dune, skim-reading Tolstoy and making swirl patterns with her toes in the sand. She wore a flowery shirt over a one-piece bathing suit, and the price tag still hung from her floppy hat. She smiled and waved at whoever passed, giving cheery good mornings as she marched down to the sea. She kicked the surf like a child and ran back and forth doing cartwheels on the shore. She joined in a game of volleyball. It was obvious she had no concept of the rules. Hammering the ball as hard as she could, she laughed hysterically at her own childish enthusiasm as the ball rocketed in all directions. By sundown, her white skin was lobster pink. It burned a scalding red. The tip of her nose shone and her chest looked like it had been lashed by 1,000 whips. I saw her tap her fingers like touching a hot plate. She stared quizzically at her red, raw sunburn, like she was figuring out a problem. She bought an ice cream from my kiosk, and I recommended sun cream. She shook her head, but thanked me all the same, as she walked off, licking the Neapolitan swirl. The next morning, I was opening up. She was first on the beach, lashing her skin in thick cream. She sat bolt upright, knees to her chest, and scanned the horizon. The tide was far out, lost somewhere in the distance behind a thin curtain of mist that crept along the shore. The sun hadn't quite heated up. The muddy flats glistened wet and oily from the white rays that found themselves through the haze. My eyes followed as she walked ankle deep in the sloshing mud. She picked up a strip of seaweed, put it into her mouth and bit. Her face twisted at the bitter salt taste. She shivered at the sour after effect and carried on her stroll in search of the sea. It was afternoon when I came across her again. My dad had taken over the kiosk and sent me to the fairground for change. As I walked through the fun fair, I received nods of recognition from all the carnival workers, mostly old friends of Dad's or long-distant cousins. As I scooped up 2 bags of loose change, I heard someone calling out to me, and there she was. Her face was smeared with scarlet toffee apple as she undulated up and down on the roller coaster ride. Dizzy, with legs shaking and a smile beaming, she clambered out of the car, waved, then vomited up hot dogs and ice cream over her plastic shoes. I helped her to a seat, where she washed away the taste with 1 gulp of cola. I asked her if she was here on holiday, and she nodded with her usual bounding enthusiasm. I told her I was from fairground people, born to the sound of seagulls and fairground rides. Dad was fond of saying donkey shit was in our blood, and I could build a sandcastle before I could walk. That line of gypsy patter always got a round of laughs from tourists, usually the pretty girls, but this time she stared at me with earnest eyes and told me how lucky I was. Where she came from didn't have such places, and she'd never seen the sea or the sand. I threw her a quizzical expression and asked her where that was. She pointed her finger skyward, hunched her shoulders and giggled. It was almost 2 days later when we met for the 4th time. She lay sprawled out on a beach towel, staring up at the blue sky. She seemed fascinated by the white seagulls that floated on the breeze. I waited until things grew quiet and made her favourite Neapolitan ice cream with 2 chocolate flakes. I hunched down next to her, handed her the cone and told her it was on the house. She took an in-breath, clapped her hands and threw me that wild smile I'd grown accustomed to. You'd think I'd handed her the keys to the kingdom. She told me that yesterday she'd been on a day trip to the town, but it bored her. Where she came from, there were plenty of towns and cities, but not the sea, not the sand. As if to illustrate a point, she dug her toes deep into the beach. She twisted this way and that, her face flushed with the pleasurable sensation it seemed to give. I asked her whether she would like dinner. She nodded. I love dinner. I returned a crumpled frown and asked if she wanted to have it with me. She nodded again. Seafood. That's what she said. She ate lobster with her fingers and enjoyed the mess it made around her chin. Afterwards, we walked back through the old casino. She stopped at the fruit machines that cluttered the lobby, singing away to themselves, calling out to everyone who passed with bing-bong chimes and flashing lights. I had long since grown immune to their charms, but her eyes remained transfixed at the reels flying by. I pulled at her. Come on, those games are all rigged. I gently guided her away, but she seemed in a trance as she walked down the line of one-armed bandits and inspected them like a sergeant major. She held out a coin, poised between thumb and forefinger, with an expression of serious intent. Eventually, she stopped at 1, dropped in the coin and pulled the lever. The sound of the winning jackpot and the crash of coins in the tray had a ring of triumph. She scooped the money into her bag and handed me a coin. She pointed out another machine. Try that one, she said, and within 10 minutes she predicted almost 4 jackpots before the management asked us to leave. With her winnings weighing us down, we were marched out. How did you do that? I asked. I'm good with machines, and those are not that complicated. We walked on the beach with the stars for company. She held my hand without a hint of furtiveness and kissed me on the mouth. The shock took my breath away. She kissed my cheeks, my nose, my eyes, my fingers. It was as if she kissed my very soul. We fell back in the long grass that nature had made for lovers. We smooched between giggles, and afterwards, as the sea hushed a lullaby against the shore and the summer breeze whispered sweet nothings, we looked at the stars that twinkled back at us. I asked her again where she came from. Once again, she pointed her finger up towards the velvet stardust sky. She traced a line left of the Great Bear and then jutted and pointed out a space of blackness between 3 stars. There, she said, that's home. I laughed at her serious tone. I'd never heard her speak without a giggle in her throat. She turned on her side, nuzzled into my neck. I closed my eyes with her joke still playing on my mind. I must have dozed, for when I woke I was alone, except for the early summer sun. I sat up. My limbs ached with the salt air and the cool morning breeze. She was gone. Half buried in the sand, in the centre of the imprint she had made in the dune where she lay, was a dark green bottle with a note stuck down the neck and my winnings piled up around it. I unfolded the scrap of paper. On it was a map of the heavens, the Great Bear and an arrow pointing to the space between 3 stars. Written in childish scrawl, the words read, "Had a lovely time. If you're ever passing this way, stop and say hello." Autumn came and the tourists left. Late one night, walking along the boardwalk, I found an old man with a telescope pointed at the stars. I asked if I could take a look. He obliged, and I asked him to point out the Great Bear. He adjusted the focus, and I stared transfixed at the empty nothingness between the stars. "Do you think there are people out there?" I said. "It's possible," he answered. "But how do we find them?" "On that beach, there's a grain of sand for every star in the sky." He reached down, scooped up a handful of sand and held it out to my face. "How many grains of sand am I holding in my hand now? 1,000, 10,000, 1,000,000? Now, imagine every grain of sand I'm holding is a planet just like ours, with people on it, just like us." He flung the sand onto the beach. The wind caught it, and in seconds it was lost along the half-mile stretch of coastline. "Now, go find those grains of sand," the old man said. Some nights I sleep on the beach, and some nights I think I can see her in the stars and still feel her hands on my cheek. And the third place story in Fantastical Stories was The Off Switch by Richard Houghton.